Hello and welcome to Backyard Birding, coming to you live from Melbourne Museum. My name's Elka and I'm in the education team here, and I'm joined by Bentley Bird today. Hi Bentley.
Hello.
Welcome, and we're very happy that you could join us today. We have people tuning in from all over, and a special shout out to any schools that we have joining us today. Don't forget, anyone watching this at home or at school can join into the conversation. We have a chat room. Please send us your questions and we will get as many to Bentley as we can. Now, we are really lucky today to be coming from a very special place in the museum, the Vertebrates Mount Store. And I will introduce Bentley to you now. Bentley Bird is the manager of the Vertebrates collection here at Museum Victoria. So Bentley,
Yes.
what is your job? Tell me about what that means.
Sure. So, Elka, we look after, there are a few of us here that we're collection managers for different areas. And I particularly work with birds, mammals, and herps, which are amphibians and reptiles also. But of course my favorite are birds. As you can see here, and we're talking to you a little bit extra about birds today, but we basically take care of the collection like as if they were books, so we're sort of like librarians for all the specimens at the museum. So we handle researchers coming in, coming out, taking care of the specimens themselves, making sure they're looked after properly if they go out on loans or things coming in, just facilitating the research and the collections here at the museum.
Great. So what parts of the museum do you work in?
So we work in, I particularly like birds, so I work in the ornithology as much as I can, but we work with the mounts as well as skins too, so I'll show you some in a minute, the difference between the type of things that we have here at the museum. So mounts, skins, also skeletons, we have wet things as well, which is in a different room, but yeah.
Great. So what do we do with our collections here?
Yeah, so we'll do a lot of in-house research, as well as we get a lot of visiting researchers coming from all over the world to access our specimens. So whether they need some historical research, so obviously the things that we have here aren't all from right now. So there are things that we have that are over 150 years old from before the museum started, and having researchers be able to come and access those things and do measurements or take tissue samples, things like that, of populations from the past. They might need that to add to their current research of the populations that maybe they're surveying in the wild now. So it's just a really good place to look at a whole spread of specimens and research.
Fantastic. Well, we've got some questions coming in.
Uh-oh.
I have a question from Jen. Thanks, Jen. Did you always know that you wanted to be a scientist?
Maybe yes and no. I always knew that I wanted to be to do something with animals. I didn't know that they would be dead, so that was sort of a new development. But I started off doing zoology, as a lot of people in our field do, because there are courses for museum science, which are available now, which are really neat, which weren't really available when I was doing uni. So I started off in zoology, did a little bit of marine, did some zookeeping, and somehow ended up in the museum taking care of the dead things, which is the best job in the world, I think.
Great. So
Thanks, Jen.
We've got some specimens here today. Now these are what we call mounted specimens. So we're in the mounts collection. What does that mean?
So the mounts, so I'm just putting on some gloves because there are some older things that are potentially harmful for us. So we do wear gloves because back in the day when they did these taxidermied animals, they used some pretty nasty stuff. But it's all safe now if we use gloves. So that's what I'm doing, by the way. But mounts are the ones like these that look like, that have the glass eyes, that look more like they're, in flight, in motion, that are better for display. So these are the things that go out on display, even to other museums and in our museum here. So we do have a big gallery downstairs that has all the taxidermied animals, and they're all the mounts. They're not as accessed as much by researchers, so I'll just reach down and grab one of these here. So this is what we call a skin. So this is actually one I prepared earlier. Actually, I prepared it. This is a black falcon. So this is a research skin, And they're used a little bit more by researchers coming in to take measurements, things like that. And they also are, nothing fancy. They've got little cotton eyes. There's no glass eyes. They don't look like they're about to, take a mouse or anything like that. So they're a little understated, but more valuable for research when researchers come in and access them. So skins, there's a little teeny partlet down there too. And yeah, so they take up less space as well. Obviously, in this mount store, there's we'll take a little mini tour later. There's stuff everywhere. It's a lot of birds and mammals in here. So obviously these fit nicer in drawers, and we can have more specimens that way if they're preserved as skins. And they're also easier to transport and send when researchers would like them somewhere else, which is handy as a collection manager. They pack nicely.
We actually had an email question come in from Robert, and he was asking about the ways that you prepare things. He actually says, how do you prepare skins versus mounts? So
that's they're similar and different. So a skin is basically, like you see here, when the bird is obviously dead, you open it up and take its insides out. You leave little bits of important pieces in, and basically you stuff it with some cotton wool, sew it back up as what it was looking like before. And then a mount is obviously a little bit more theatrical. A little bit more work goes into a mount. So any of these are prepared by, we do have a preparations department in-house. We're very lucky to have that, which not a lot of other museums have. So we have expert taxidermists downstairs working their magic and creating these really spectacular display sort of items, I guess. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into them. So there's lots of wire, there's lots of support. There might be like fiberglass molds on bigger animals, things like that. So it takes a lot of artistic kind of, know-how as well as the scientific side of it. So it's a really neat blend of art and science, as you might say. But yeah, so we prepare, as a collection manager, I prepare skins. I don't do mounts yet, but it's really a good skill to have. It's not something that's, you learn it on the job. There aren't really classes for it, so it's really something that, a new skill I've learned at work in the past few years, which has been really, really neat. You can add to science. This will be in the museum forever, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, so it's really neat, and they'll be, part of history is probably not as famous as Darwin, etc. But Bentley Bird's bird in the collection is pretty neat, I think.
So one of the questions we've had come in from Beck was, what is your favourite bird?
Well, I'll stick to my favorite Australian bird today because, we're in Australia, even though you might hear I might not be originally from here, so I have a few favorite Florida birds too. But we'll talk about my favorite Australian bird, which I actually have out today because it's a really good backyard bird. So I'll just grab it here. So this is our eastern spinebill. So they're a honey eater. So they have these little, I don't know if you can see, it doesn't have its tongue out, so it's not prepared with this tongue out. Thank you, Alka. But they have these little feathery tongues that come out. So they're honey eaters, but they look a lot like hummingbirds. So another one of my favorites. So they're just a really sweet little bird, and they're quite active in the backyard. So if they're around, you'll probably see them coming down, often in a pair. So it's just a really beautiful bird. That's a cute little one that they're just really adorable and sweet, and they're really fun to see in your backyard. It feels really special, even though they're pretty common. So
great.
Eastern spinebill.
Okay, so we've heard a bit about the different ways that we might present and store collections. And you mentioned that skins in particular are easier to hold in larger numbers and transport around. So how do researchers use them?
Yeah, so it varies. It depends on what they're doing. So they might be doing like gathering morphological data, which is based on the body. So maybe the measurements of the bills versus the wing length and the feet and things like that, or sometimes color. But often you can also get, if it's an old specimen, so we take tissue with every specimen that we get in nowadays. That didn't always happen because no one knew what DNA was at the beginning of museum collections. So now we can actually still get a tissue sample from the toe pads or feathers or things like that, in particular with birds. And then, with these old populations that obviously you can't go out and survey because the time has passed and they're not there anymore. So it's really, really good for things like that, as well as people are also finding new species in the collection. So you can look through a drawer, well, not all the time, but sometimes, if you know what you're doing, and actually find a new species based on different things you can see in the drawer, like in the collection. So a lot of the research that happens at the museum is coupled with field work. So a lot of researchers will go into the field, look at these specimens in the wild, maybe do some blood samples, things like that, collect tissue and different things, and then they can come in to our collection and also kind of back that up and also see how populations have changed over time. So things like, if they're a different color, 100 years ago, and now they're, have changed color because of this and that, maybe environmental factors, fire, things like that. So it's a big question. But, basically a lot of things that you can't get from just doing it, wildlife surveys or going out with binoculars, basically.
Fantastic. And I suppose we don't know what questions we want to ask in the future, do we?
Exactly. We have to be like, mind readers for the researchers of the future, just like they were 100 years ago, trying to predict what we would ask now of their specimens that they've collected. So it's all a big circle of mind reading and science.
Now, in this room and also on this table, we've got some quite older specimens.
Yeah.
What would be the oldest specimen?
Oh.
Do you have any idea, or is that a really difficult question?
No, I've seen things from late 1800s, so specimens, but I think I should have looked that up. That's a good question, but I have seen really old. So the museum started, like our museum, about 150 years ago or so, but then there are things that have been collected before that. So specimens that have been bought from, like way back when, you can't buy them anymore, from naturalists, so Gould in particular, who had a lot of Darwin and Wallace specimens, and now we have them in the museum because we bought them. So they're, yes, very old.
Very old.
1800s.
So how do you take care of them? Do you get out the little Ajax or something?
A little vacuum sometimes. So we do have a natural sciences conservation person. Hi, Danny. Thank you. And she can come in, and if there's something that's looking particularly messy, or before they go out on a loan, or on display, they get clean. So basically, it's like a little vacuum, and they get their little zhuzhed up, and sometimes they get a little paint from the preps or something like that if they're going out on display. And yeah, otherwise we just make sure to keep them away from pests. So we are in a really closed room. It's temperature controlled, humidity controlled. So, and it's also, no food or drinks in here to attract pests. Pests are probably the scariest thing for our specimens. So moths and things like that, we don't want to eat them, because then we can never collect them again because they're so old.
Okay, so the vertebrates collection includes all vertebrates, but you love birds.
I do.
Why?
Well, like I said, I've always loved animals, and I actually used to not like birds at one point.
Really?
Yeah, parrots in particular. When in my little zoo stint, they just hated me. Apparently, it's a thing, and I don't know if it's a fear thing. They can smell my fear of their bills. I don't know. But now, well, also because they're dead now, it's a little bit easier. They're not going to bite me. But I took a course, so I didn't think I'd get into birds, and I took a course at uni, and it just turned me around, and I was just very interested in birds after that, and I just sort of learned them all in Florida, and then when I moved here, it was just natural to get back into it. Right. So I'm still learning the Victorian and Australian birds, but it's just it's a great place for birds. It's amazing. Your backyard is wonderful.
Well, speaking of which, earlier this week we went out into our backyard, which is the Carlton Gardens. We're very fortunate to be surrounded by beautiful parklands here at the Melbourne Museum. And we took out a video camera and we asked you about your hot tips for birding. So we're going to show you that video now.
Today we are in Carlton Gardens in the middle of the city in Melbourne, and we have the Royal Exhibition building behind us. So we'll try and find the birds that we can see in my backyard here, and there'll be some of the ones that you'll be finding in your backyard during the backyard bird count. Obviously, we're in the middle of the city. There are buildings all around us, but we are in a nice little pocket of urban jungle here. So some of the birds that we'll be able to see today are ones that you'll find in your backyard too. There are some that are in the bush as well that do make their homes here in urban environments. But we do have a forest gallery inside the museum where we're able to see a lot of birds all at once because they are in captivity there. But we are able to see some of those species out here too. So we've had things like powerful owls here roosting, and then they went to the Botanic Gardens after that, making a stop over here. We get things at night as well, so not only the possums. We have tawny frogmouths, which you'll recognize. They're hard to see because they're camouflaged so well. We also get things like the regular, I don't know if you can hear them, we have magpies, magpie larks, we've got ducks, we've got, there's a Nankeen night heron, which is very special over at the pond that makes an appearance sometimes. And we get the regular silver gulls too, there I just heard one now, they're regulars here at the park. Sometimes birding can be a little bit hard if you're just starting out. So I've got some top tips to get anybody started, whether you're in your own backyard or whether you're in the bush or in the field like a scientist do. So my number one top tip is get up early. So right now isn't a fabulous time to see birds. It's about noon or so in the afternoon, and it's a little bit quiet. So top tip, get up early. The birds get up early. You'll hear the dawn chorus. You'll hear all the birds waking up, and that's a great way to find them, is by listening. Sometimes you might not see the birds first. You'll hear them first. So learning a few calls, things like willy wagtails, I'm sure everybody knows, and things like a kookaburra, for instance. You'll hear those first before you see them, and that's a really good way to start learning birds and also to identify them. One of the ways to learn birds is definitely do it one at a time. So don't get frustrated and have to learn all of them all at once. It's going to be very hard and you'll get very confused, I promise. So when you're listening to calls, there's a great way to learn them. We have a field guide app, a Museum Victoria field guide app, and it's really great to listen. If you go, oh wait, what was that bird? I think it was, and then you can go through the field guide app and actually play back and listen and go, oh yep, that was that bird I saw and I heard. And there are also identifications in there too for the visual. Once you see the bird, you can check and see what it was. But when you're identifying birds in the field or in your backyard, with your field guide app or with your field guide, I've got an old-fashioned book. There's nothing wrong with that too. Note what size it is. Is it huge? Is it tiny? Is it brown? The brown ones are the hardest to identify. They're LBJs, or little brown jobs. Someone's coined that in the past. So there are a lot of LBJs out there, but don't get discouraged. Take it easy. You can at least identify with the size. You can go back to your field guide and at least narrow it down to sort of a family or at least a group and impress your friends. If you're looking for birds in an urban area, often you'll need to find some trees. So head towards the trees. That's not saying that there aren't cockatoos flying into buildings, because I've seen that too, and they're hanging out on perches there, and that's still one of the really cool things I like to see. But yeah, head towards the trees. That's where they kind of hang out, or some water as well. So I don't know if you can hear in the background, but we're very close to a pond, and that's a really good place to look for birds, water birds, just birds having a drink, ducks, things like that. And that's where our special Nankeen night heron hangs out, which is one of my favorites here in the gardens. Another one of my top tips for finding birds is listening, and in order to listen, you have to be quiet. So there is a little bit of a hum of people, and there's a buzz about here when you're in an urban area. But if you're in a backyard or somewhere in a park, just sit down and look at what you're doing. The birds will come to you if you're quiet. Then they kind of think you're part of the scenery and will go about their business, and you can see them doing some neat things. So maybe feeding, or they might be on a nest, something like that. And it's really neat to be able to see what they're doing. After you've listened, maybe you've found sort of where the tree, where the sound is coming from a certain tree. Have a look with your binoculars if you have them. It's a little bit better to have them, but if not, it's okay. And look for movement first. So often some birds might be in a hole in a tree, using that as their nest. So some of the parrots do that. So if you see a hole in a tree, look there first. I hear some lorikeets now. So they're going up into the tree. So also, if you see a bird go in a tree, look there first. So up into the tree, any movement, and then watch it first, see what's going on, keep looking at it. And then that's when you bring the binoculars to your eyes so you don't lose it. Because if you look down at your binoculars, you've lost the bird already. My biggest tip, something that I like to do if I'm maybe not actively birding, is passively birding. So just sitting wherever you are, if you're on holiday, if you're just taking a break in the park, just enjoy it. So if you're doing that thing I talked about, being quiet, and letting the birds come to you, just enjoy what you're doing and enjoy the birds, enjoy seeing the birds.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We had a lot of fun in the park and some great tips. I certainly learned a lot anyway. So we have quite a few questions coming through now. What's the strangest animal you've preserved?
The strangest animal I've preserved. Well, maybe if I'm thinking of parts of animals, I might leave that part. Whales and things. So I actually do get to go out and do some whale recovery when they're dead and not going to, there's no rescue aspect of that part once they call us. So I've been really lucky to do some whale work, and I think preserving the livers and things like that, the tissue samples from the whales are pretty gross. So that's probably the most interesting thing that I've preserved as far as vertebrate animals go. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds very interesting.
Not the fish that I did when I was in high school or middle school. My first fish that died. I think that's when I knew I was going to be a scientist, when I preserved my yellow tang that died.
Wow.
Early on.
Another question we have from Vanessa. Do you have any extinct birds?
Yeah, we do. So we have quite a handful, and they're in locked cabinets. They're not out on this table right now. So we do have a lot of things that, don't exist anymore. So that's what's really, a big part of the museum. And museums all over having those things. That's why, you do collect and do get things in that you may not see again. And we also have, I know it's not a bird, but we have some thylacines too, which are really neat. So that's very cool. Love that.
A very, very popular part of the gallery, the one that we have on display anyway.
Yes.
Another question. Can you recommend good binoculars for bird watching?
Ooh! Well, everyone has their own, it's the same with the bird books. Everyone has, what they like. So my recommendation would be to, if you're sort of an entry-level birder, get, a little bit up from the entry-level binoculars. Don't get some plastic ones. If you're gonna, if you really are gonna use this as a passion, spend a little bit of money on them. But, you don't have to go overboard. You don't have to get the, thousands of dollars. If this is your first pair of binoculars, don't get the crazy ones. If you win them, that's different. I think you can win them and back your bird count.
Really?
That's just a rumor I heard. So get your counts in also. But yeah, so just really, use your budget. Whatever your budget is, there are binoculars for it. So that's my recommendation. Don't go overboard on your first pair of binoculars.
Fantastic. So if you've given us some tips about how to spot birds, how do you identify them once you have spotted them? So what things do you look for?
Yeah. Well, listening is good. So once you can hear them, identifying the call, that's a a different kettle of fish there. But if you're identifying the bird, the things to look for is if, like, what size they are. Are they big? Is it, can you get it down to, like, it's a parrot? Great. Or it's not a parrot? Great. Is it big? Is it tiny? Getting those kind of bases done first will help you narrow it down. Also knowing what you're looking for. So if you're looking for something like a flamingo here in Victoria, that probably won't happen. So if you see something that looks like a flamingo, it's probably not, and maybe you should think about looking for something in your field guide app or your book, something with long legs, with a long neck, so maybe it's an egret or something like that, or a heron. So getting kind of breaking it down is good. Is a good start. At least getting them sort of to family or group, and then you can get Bird Book out or the Field Guide app out and go, okay, yep, it had this pattern on it, or it was all one color. Things like that, sort of the distinguishing characters.
Great. Now, talking about apps, we were looking at the Museum Victoria Field Guide app when we were out in the park, and we can have a look at it here. So we can have the guide right here. We can click on animals and have a look at what's coming through. So we're looking at birds. And it's very easy to just identify. You've got to have a bit of an idea of what kind of bird it is, but then there's a picture straight away so you can have a look. The Field Guide app's good, particularly for schools who are listening in, because it has not just birds but all different kinds of animals in it. So if you're doing biodiversity surveys in your local area or in your school grounds, this is really good. The other one that I'm going to show you, of course, goes with the Aussie Backyard Bird Count, which is happening on the 17th to 23rd of October. You can register online at aussiebirdcount.org.au, and this is a pretty nifty little field guide. So the field guide's just there, and as Bentley said, you sort of have an idea of what size the bird is, and then you can get an idea of the silhouette that it has. So does it have a long neck? Does it have long feet, etc. So that one's quite user-friendly, and it's a good one to use, particularly if you are doing the backyard bird count. I'd like to show you a couple of websites now that might be handy, because we've had some questions coming in about how do you do identifications and how do you find out bird calls and things. This website's called Bowerbird, and Bowerbird is basically anyone can contribute to it. You need to have a photo. You can put it up and you can say, I know that is, I'm not going to read that word, but yes, I know the scientific name of that. I'm an expert in this. Or you can say, it's a small beetle and I don't quite know what it is. The good thing about that is that it's looked at by a panel of experts, and they will confirm what it is and put in the correct name. And about once a week that gets fed into our Atlas of Living Australia. And then you can see the distribution of different species. That's got data from not just input from people's own sightings, but it's also got input from our collections. So you might find something that was found in the 1880s that we know the location for and that perhaps isn't found there anymore. The last thing that you might be interested in, if you are particularly looking for things for school projects or that sort of thing, is our collections online. So Museum Victoria collections, you can type in, what should we look up? Cockatoo.
Yeah, I was going to say birds.
Cockatoo, and search. And we'll get a whole range of different things. So some of them might be historical, so we can actually go in and filter them and find out certain things exactly. Filter by, oh, here we go. So we want to find something that is a specimen and that has images.
Ooh.
And then we can see eggs and lots of different specimens, mostly eggs actually.
Yeah.
But yes, it's good to use, and very, very easy to download the images as well. You just click on this button, reuse image, and you can download it in incredibly high quality. And by doing that, we also know which ones are getting used, and it has all the citations there, so you can use it freely and for whatever needs you require. Okay, so hopefully that's given you some ideas of how to find out more information about birds and other animals too. All right, Bentley, I believe you are going to take us for a little walk through the collection now.
That would be exactly right. Okay, let's go.
So I assume they're all organised by some particular
Taxonomy.
Okay.
So this is just a sneak peek, one of our rows of our mount store here. So we've just stopped at our wedge-tailed eagles because they are one of the backyard birds that you may be lucky enough to see hopefully in your backyard or on the way to somewhere. Usually is when I see them on the flying over the road, just kind of hovering there. Big, beautiful, powerful animals, and we do have quite a few of them here in the mount collection. So yeah, this is just a tiny little bit. So we have quite a few rows of birds in here, all the way along on either side, and they're on what we call compactus, so they're rolling shelves. So we try and use up all the space that we can, and they are, like I said, ordered taxonomically, so that is a way that most museums order their specimens. So kind of from beginning to end. We also have mammals in this room. I don't know if you may or may not be able to sneak a peek of them behind us eventually, which are pretty neat. So we have our very special thylacine in this room as well. But yeah, so we do have the mounts all in this room, and then our skins, our skeletons, our more research specimens are next door in another store that looks a lot like this. So again, climate controlled, organized taxonomically. Everything's actually barcoded to a location as well. So in the event that someone comes in here and doesn't know where anything goes, we can find it and put it back in the right spot, or find a particular specimen that a researcher wants to look for. So it's especially helpful in our big drawers when we have lots and lots of the same specimens. Then we can go, oh, yep, it's actually in this drawer, instead of, the whole 40 drawers of pardalotes or whatever we're looking for. Yep. We can narrow it down a little bit, which is nice.
We've got a question coming in here. Can members of the public visit the mount store?
Ooh, that's not on a regular basis, but there are back of house tours that come up. So they've done member tours. I've done a member tour not too long ago, and we actually found someone who donated one of our mounts. His great-grandmother, anyway, someone in his family a long time ago donated something here, and he was on my tour, and he found it. And he goes, oh my God, it's a dog. And he found it here, and he goes, oh my God, that's my grandma's dog, and we thought it was fake. We didn't think that was a real story, and it was here. So yes, members of the public can come through on special occasions, but it's always posted online. It's usually a ticketed event, but we do have small numbers come through, because obviously it's a very tight space, and there's only a few of us in here now, and it's a little bit tight, so we do have to regulate that. But researchers come in all the time, so from other institutions, and our collection is available to them, as well as vice versa, if we needed to go to one of their collections and use it as well.
Keep your eye on the website if that's what you're interested in. All right, let's continue down this little lane.
So we have some more. This is obviously the bird of prey section here.
Now, we'll just have a couple more questions. I have to ask you, Bentley, it's come up a couple of times. People are asking you to do your best bird call. Now, I'm not going to put you on the spot. If you really feel like that's something you're going to do, you can.
Yeah, okay, sure. So, I've talked about it actually already on accident. It's actually, my favorite one is a flamingo. It's a baby flamingo from my zoo days. So I did an internship in Florida, and we had baby flamingos that I got to take care of. And in the morning, it was very, very cold, even in Florida, believe it or not. And we'd bring them out of their night house, and they'd come out, and they would, you'd lean down, and they'd you'd open the little house and they'd come out and they would immediately come and give you a little flamingo cuddle in the morning, which meant they put their nose down your top and got warm in there, and they made this little noise. So if you can imagine a little flamingo like warming up in the morning with its little head in your shirt, and they make this little like noise. I'm only going to do it once, that's it. You're welcome, everybody.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
They look a lot more adorable when they do it, because they're baby flamingos. But
I didn't want to put you on the spot, but people are asking.
That's all right.
Okay, look, I think we might wrap it up there. Thank you so much for showing us around this beautiful space and giving us all this amazing information. Don't forget, of course, that the Australian Backyard Bird Count is on in 9 days' time, 17th to the 23rd of October. As I said, register online, download your field guide apps, get ready to be part of this great citizen science event. Thank you very much, Bentley Bird.
Anytime.
And thank you for joining us. It's been wonderful.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.